Planned Parenthood in disarray as Dr. Leana Wen gets fired, showing what the whole thing is really all about. It's really all, as always, just about abortion. You're listening,
John,
to Right to Life. Hey,
all right,
back up.
All right.
Back up.
Okay, go ahead.
You're listening before I was rudely interrupted with the show open to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. I am John Girardi. I am the host of the show. I'm the executive director of Right to Life. RTLCC.org is where you want to be. Joining me, as always, and maybe for the last time, is the rude interrupting cow,
yeah.
Jonathan Keller.
One of my favorite dad jokes. John, I was just going to point out that you used a very politically incorrect term. You said Dr. Leana Wen was fired. No, it was just a termination of her contract. She wasn't fired. It was it was a premature termination.
Yes. That seems to be what has happened. Planned Parenthood
her
really
presidency was aborted in the 43rd week, as Steven Crowder said.
Yes. She's gone.
She only made it to the fourth trimester.
All right. Now, Planned Parenthood, showing once again that they're great lovers of both women and minorities, fires their, first minority woman president in a long, I think ever, and does so a month after she has a miscarriage. So that's great. They, obviously all really, really care about women. But we're going to talk about today, we're going to try to dig into why this whole thing is really significant and why this whole thing matters. I mean, some of you may be thinking, what does it matter? It's the head of Planned Parenthood. There must be some kind of internal squabbling. What does it matter if one person's in charge of it versus another? Well, it really has, I think, some significant implications for what Planned Parenthood's focus and direction is and what the future of the pro-life movement... Oh my gosh, I'm hearing echoes of Jonathan Keller.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. And where the future of the pro-choice movement is going. So I'm going to start by pulling up... So I pull up my Twitter account. By the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't really push my Twitter account very much. And I realized I wasn't pushing it much because I realized that my Twitter handle was hard to spell. And it was hard to encourage people to go to it because I'm like, do I have to spell out my whole last name for people?
Have you been injured in a workplace accident? Visit the Twitter handle of John V. Girardi.
Exactly. Yeah. So my old Twitter handle was at John V. Girardi, which, let me tell you something. Girardi is not an easy last name to spell, nor apparently is an easy last name to pronounce for people who haven't seen it. So I have updated my Twitter handle. If you want to follow me on Twitter, just look for at Fresno Johnny. At Fresno Johnny. Hard to get any simpler than that. At Fresno Johnny. I don't have a weird way of spelling Johnny. It's just Johnnny. Hopefully,
but the H is important.
That H is important. It separates me from that morbid class of people, the Jonathans. So,
that's right.
Anyway,
and I feel the same way. I don't mind if you spell my name Jon. You can call me John,
but don't you dare throw that H in.
Leave that H. Get it out of here.
Get that H out my face.
Get that the H out of here.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So here is what Dr. Leana Wen said in an email about her firing. She says, "There is a lot more work ahead. I am leaving the organization sooner than I'd hoped because of philosophical differences about the direction and future of Planned Parenthood. I came to Planned Parenthood to run a national healthcare organization and to advocate for the broad range of public health policies that affect our patients' health." Public health policies that affect our patients' health. Yeah, no kidding. Ensuring, am I really going to be just nitpicking her prose? All right. Ensuring access to quality, affordable healthcare, which includes the full spectrum of reproductive healthcare for all, improving maternal health and health. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So she talked about all these healthcare things that she wanted to push and promote. The new board leadership, she writes, has determined that the priority of Planned Parenthood moving forward is to double down on abortion rights advocacy.
And John, you're not paraphrasing that. I want everyone to understand. She actually used the phrase double down
on abortion rights advocacy. With the landscape changing dramatically in the last several months and the right to safe legal abortion care under attack like never before, I understand the shift in the board's prioritization. I will continue my life's work and mission of caring for and fighting for women, families, and communities, and I will do everything I can to ensure a smooth transition in leadership. So she got fired because her focus was more on running a healthcare organization. And that's not what Planned Parenthood needs. Because they're not really a healthcare organization. They're an abortion organization. That is the focus. And there have been a lot of attacks, obviously, in the last a lot of efforts in defense of innocent unborn children that have successfully been enacted in states throughout the country in the last several months, as well as some really big developments in federal Title X funding, which we may talk about later on in the show. And this is sort of Planned Parenthood revealing its true colors. There was an interesting op-ed about this in USA Today, written by Rich Lowry, which I'm going to pull up. And the way he starts it, I think, is hilarious. He says, poor Leana Wen. She actually bought into all of Planned Parenthood's propaganda. Planned Parenthood for years has been trying to put forward this whole notion. We are about healthcare. That's who we are as Planned Parenthood. We are about women's healthcare, and abortion is just a simple, basic part of women's healthcare. That's what we're about. Healthcare. That's it. Nothing more and nothing less. Which, correctly, they realized polls well and is good as a PR strategy to say our focus is on healthcare rather than on abortion. And they would put forward all kinds of phony baloney statistics about, abortions are really, it's only about 3% of what we do, blah, 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 blah. However, the truth of the matter was always something different. Abortion is not 3% of what they do. They had to use the most convoluted and ridiculous accounting shenanigans possible to come up with that number. Basically, if you go in for an abortion and they also give you some pain medication to deal with the pain, and they give you a prescription for this, and they give you that, abortion only counts as like 1/5 of that appointment, even though you came in there for an abortion. Okay. So they did all these shenanigans to show that abortion is only 3% of what they do. The reality is that abortion is fundamental to what they do. Abortion is also fundamental to their business model. The business model Planned Parenthood has is that it aggressively, so it's a nonprofit, so they get tax-deductible donations, they get government grants, they get government-funded healthcare, and they're able to bill to government-funded insurance programs like Medi-Cal in California. They're able to bill to them and get paid back money for a lot of their services. We at Right to Life Essential California are doing something very similar. We are working with the Obria group to start an Obria medical clinic in Fresno, a fully functioning women's reproductive health care clinic that comes from a pro-life perspective. The reason that our clinic is not going to be profitable is because of one service and one service only. The one service, one of a few services, I should say. One of a few services that Planned Parenthood does and that our clinic will not do. And that is abortion. Abortion is, of all of the services Planned Parenthood provides to patients, services,
quote
patients,
unquote,
quote unquote, using scare quotes here. Abortion is the one that makes them the most money. It is their largest source of revenue after government funding and donations. It's abortions. This is why when Abby Johnson was director of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Texas, she talked about, she received awards because she was meeting these abortion quotas within her clinics, and they were performing a large number of abortions, and they were, incentivizing these clinics to perform more and more abortions because abortions make them money. They make money off of abortion. That is what Planned Parenthood does. That is how Planned Parenthood clinics go from being a nonprofit clinic that loses money and that would need to rely on charitable donations to being an entity that makes money. A nonprofit organization that makes about $1 billion per year?
Yes.
Or that has $1 billion in the bank. I can't remember which, but they make a ton of money.
And John, you look at most of their other services that Planned Parenthood
they have a $1 billion budget every year. I think that's
I think that sounds right.
That's right.
You look at most of the other services they offer, things like STD testing, things like pregnancy tests and verification. Things like
woman exam.
woman exams, pap smears, cervical exams, cervical cancer screenings, types of things like this. Almost every other service they offer, I mean, with the exception of maybe their very graphic sex education, quote unquote. Yeah. With that exception, almost all the medical services they offer are completely non-controversial, but they're also
They also don't bill well, and they're available in a lot of other places.
And in fact, John, you mentioned Obria Medical Group. All of those services, basically, that Planned Parenthood offers, I mean, almost all of them are going to be offered by Obria, correct?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the idea that we want to have an actual prenatal women's healthcare clinic that we want it to directly compete with Planned Parenthood and take away all of their patients, and change the minds of all of their abortion-minded patients, and take the business away from them so that their patients who aren't going there for abortion can receive services and help also. That's our mindset. So Leana Wen bought into, though, this demagoguery, the propaganda. The propagandary. That's a George W. Bush word. She bought into the propaganda that this organization is about healthcare. And really, it's about abortion. Really, it's about abortion advocacy. And really, it's about being the big political gorilla on Capitol Hill advocating for abortion rights. We're going to talk about that more after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Right to Life Radio. This is Europe with Cherokee. The best bumper music in the greater Fresno area radio market.
You got Elizabeth Warren's favorite song.
Cherokee. Hey! Did you drop your phone?
I did. All
right, why don't you go grab it down there, Jonathan?
It was just me preemptively dropping the mic with that great Elizabeth Warren joke.
Way to go, John. Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. That song, So Europe is a band from like Scandinavia somewhere. I think they're from Sweden.
Are they the band that does the Final Countdown?
Yeah, they're most famous for the Final Countdown. Totally makes sense that a Swedish hair metal band decided to write a song about the Cherokee Indians and the Trail of Tears. It seemed like an odd combo, but it's a pretty cool song. Anyway, Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Okay. We're talking about Dr. Leana Wen and her firing from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood hired Dr. Leana Wen only about 10 months ago, and she was the first actual doctor to lead Planned Parenthood in over 50 years. You know who I think the last doctor was to lead Planned Parenthood?
That nonpartisan, non-controversial, totally objective Dr. Alan Guttmacher?
Yes, Dr. Alan Guttmacher, after whom Planned Parenthood named its Guttmacher Institute. Dr. Alan Guttmacher, big-time fan of eugenics. Big-time fan of eugenics way after people were pretty much done with eugenics, way after World War II, like in the late 50s, was still talking about how totally cool eugenics was. Dr. Alan Guttmacher. So there you go. The first doctor to lead Planned Parenthood since then. Because again, they're about healthcare. Or so she thought. After Dr. Wen got fired, she had an email come out saying that there's been a sort of philosophical shift between her and the board of directors of Planned Parenthood. The board of directors wants their president to be more focused to, quote, as she said, quote, double down on abortion rights advocacy, which shows what Planned Parenthood is. They are a political animal. Now, why are they moving in this way? I think they're moving in this way because they are losing. They are losing bigly. We are winning so much, it's going to make their heads spin. We're going to be sick of winning. One of the ways in which they are losing is they just lost a significant source, not their biggest source of federal funding, but a significant source of their federal funding from the federal Title X program. This is a big deal for us at Right to Life, us who are starting our Obria clinic, because Obria is going to be a recipient of some of this federal Title X funding, and we are very excited about it. So let's explain what the federal Title X program is and what President Trump was trying to do with his outrageous ruling, which every media outlet tries to describe as, well, these experts are decrying this, blah, blah, blah. Title X was this federal program created in the 70s under the Nixon administration. The idea of it was to fund various state and private family planning entities and programs and clinics. But in the 70s, right after Roe, there was this very strong sentiment in Congress, as expressed by people like Henry Hyde and even people like Teddy Kennedy, that whatever you think about abortion, the U.S. taxpayers should not be forced to pay for it. Okay, the federal taxpayer dollars should not be forced to pay for abortion. So, in funding this family planning program, this federal family planning program, Congress wrote into the statutory language of Title X these provisions that the funds that we're giving, these grants that we're giving for family planning programs, cannot enrich abortion providers. That abortion providers are not eligible for federal Title X funding. And yet, Planned Parenthood has been getting this money for decades. How the heck did that work? Well, a delightful sleight of hand that Planned Parenthood has played on us all for several decades. Basically, Planned Parenthood perpetuated this legal fiction. They said, basically, here's our clinic. Here are the four walls of our clinic. We do abortions inside these four walls. We also provide family planning services within these four walls. However, within these four walls are actually two clinics. Shocking.
That's amazing.
Our Title X clinic happens to be located at this address, and our abortion clinic happens to be located at this address. Amazingly, through this legal fiction of having two clinics located on the same site and with much of the same staff, but perhaps only with like two separate columns of money in their budget, and sometimes not even that. Basically, we allow ourselves the ability to receive this big chunk of about $60 million that would go to Planned Parenthood every year in federal Title X programs in states throughout the country.
John, let me offer an
in spite
example.
of the fact that they do abortions.
Let's imagine that you have a church, a Catholic church or a Protestant church, and you have the building, the four walls of the building, and on Sundays inside those four walls, you have a staff that conducts services. They provide childcare. They do producer Raphael, we were talking during the break about, Vacation Bible School. They do all sorts of different good things for their community. And also, in that same location during the week is a committee to re-elect President Trump.
Yeah,
and
don't think that would fly.
But it's the same building, and it's the same staff. But no, John, you don't understand. It's totally different funding
Totally
source.
separate. Totally separate. They have nothing to do with each other.
Even though there's about 100% overlap.
Look, the nonprofit laws that the U.S. that are embedded within the federal tax code, they're clearly like totally okay with churches hosting political rallies and promoting candidates and endorsing candidates, and they're totally okay with that. It's not like the explicit language of the tax code is meant deliberately to avoid that outcome. So it's pretty much like that. Planned Parenthood has skated on this for years. The Reagan administration, and this held over into the George H.W. Bush administration, tried to institute rules to stop that, basically saying, no, you can't have the same, you can't, be co-located. You can't have your abortion clinic and your Title X clinic be in the same place. You have to have separate finances, and you have to be separate physically. If you're doing abortions on site, you can't be a recipient of federal Title X. And that decision by the Reagan administration was actually upheld in a U.S. Supreme Court decision. Well, Bill Clinton came into office in January of 1993, and he swept that regulation away. And we have been living under those Clinton-era Title X rules ever since. These Clinton-era Title X rules, which allow, again, this legal fiction of your abortion clinic and your Title X clinic to be located in the same spot. this remained the case even through the George W. Bush administration. It's actually one of the big kind of pro-life disappointments of the George W. Bush administration. We'll see if John Roberts is the main pro-life disappointment. But it's one of the, as far as we know, the main pro-life disappointment of the George W. Bush administration was the fact that they did not challenge this whole thing with federal Title X. And even though there were people within the George W. Bush White House who were pushing for the administration to do it, it happened at this time where there were all these sensitive negotiations about the Iraq War, and it was a real cruddy prioritization scheme where this was pushed aside in favor of, the war in Iraq. Now, this is why, and we're delighted that the Trump administration is doing this. Obviously, it's been very hard to defund Planned Parenthood normally because you need Congress to go along with it, and Congress tried to defund Planned Parenthood along with repeal Obamacare and do that all in one fell swoop in the first 2 years of the Trump administration.
Thanks, John McCain.
And that completely bombed thanks to, at various points, John McCain and Rand Paul. So the main defunding of Planned Parenthood that needed to happen is their war chest of $400 million a year that they receive in Medicaid reimbursements. And that is not drying up, unfortunately, because that's going to require a big shift in Congress as it's currently constituted. But we appreciate the Trump administration cutting off this Title X funding supply to Planned Parenthood and diverting it to entities like Oberyn. Oberyn is going to receive money under this. And now that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld it, it seems like that's definitely going to happen. So we're excited, and I can understand in light of that why Planned Parenthood thinks they need another kind of political bulldog, maybe someone more like Cecile Richards to be running this thing. We'll talk about that more after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. This is Kansas. Carry on, my wayward son, with Kansas here on Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Jonathan just got back from Kansas.
I did.
How was it? Flat?
Yes, it was very flat and very humid.
All right.
We went out to the zoo one morning, and it was that great combo of 80 degrees and 80% humidity.
Man, sounds like a couple of days in South Bend, Indiana. Jeez, that's it's bringing back some memories.
It was I'm trying to make a song reference, but none of the lyrics from that song really justify our trip.
No, not really. I don't understand. I guess they must have been from Kansas, but anyway, Kansas is pretty awesome. So
it is funny, John, though, just how many bands, when you think about it, have the entire band name is just a city or a state.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of bands, and I think they tended to be like guys who were like just dudes who worked for these studios. Like Boston was a big one, Chicago was another, and they tended to be like these awesome musicians. So they were like, hey, rather than just like, being studio guys helping out famous people, let's just get together and do our own thing. We're better than all these guys anyway.
We'll just be called Kansas or Alabama.
I was up in the air between doing Carry On My Wayward Son versus Dust in the Wind. God, Dust in the Wind is awesome. But I found with this radio show that the energy really goes down when I play like pretty like melodic, calming, sweet songs.
That's fair.
So anyway, Right to Life Radio with John Girardi. So it's very interesting that Planned Parenthood has fired its former president, Dr. Leana Wen, because honestly, I think this is a terrible look by them to openly have communications coming out saying that we're doing this to double down on abortion rights advocacy. I think it's really kind of a big mistake, because I think the language that Dr. Wen was using, that we're just about women's health care, we're about healthcare, abortion is part of healthcare, reproductive health care for women, blah, 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 blah. That was the message she was putting forward. And Planned Parenthood saying, no, our abortion rights are under threat. Meanwhile, I think they are overestimating how, quote, unpopular these pro-life laws that are being passed in states throughout the South and Ohio. It's basically the Big Ten in Ohio. the SEC in Ohio. They're overestimating how unpopular those laws are, I think, because I don't think those laws are particularly that unpopular, especially the heartbeat bans.
I don't know, John. It's a pretty unpopular law when it gets passed by a supermajority of the elected representatives in your state.
Right, exactly.
That's
and it's
super unpopular.
And it's not, I mean, like, Ohio is not exactly, I mean, obviously it's become more red lately, but I mean, Ohio was long a swing state and has some pretty strong, has some pretty big Democrat strongholds in it.
But John, I mean, come on, look at a state like Alabama. I mean, when was the last time a Democrat was elected to the Senate from there?
Oh, wait, yeah. Let's be fair that was under some very particular circumstances.
I'll use another example. Oh, gosh, Louisiana. I mean, surely this was a partisan, party line vote where,
it was introduced by a Democrat state legislator and signed by a Democrat governor.
Signed by the Democrat governor, yeah.
Yeah. So
super unpopular. That's right.
So Planned Parenthood seems to be thinking all these pro-life laws that are being passed, President Trump's regulation of Title X, they seem to be thinking this is all really unpopular, and that if they move their focus from we're just about healthcare and we're just trying to fight for women's healthcare against this mean Trump administration, and shift to our abortion rights, our abortion care rights are under threat, help us defend abortion. People don't want to be defending abortion. Like, people don't like talking about abortion. Like, people don't like thinking that they're defending abortion. If they think that they're just defending healthcare rights and women's rights, that's easier for them to swallow, I think. And I think polling data indicated that was better. One of the reasons also why Dr. Wen, it is rumored, or there's some reporting on this from BuzzFeed. God, who would have thought in like 2009 when I was using BuzzFeed to find the funniest GIFs of cats, that they would actually try to arrogate themselves to the title of a news outlet. Anyway, according to some reporting from BuzzFeed, there was some discontent with Dr. Leana Wen because she kept talking about women's health care and kept saying that abortion was important for women.
That is so
and
transphobic.
That is transphobic because, according to transgender ideology, men can get pregnant.
Didn't you hear Julian Castro in the Democratic debate?
Well, yeah, he wants to guarantee abortion for all men.
Yes. Let's not forget about abortion rights for trans women, as he said in the debate.
By the way, just as a secret aside, almost all abortion is for men.
Hot take. A very hot take, but true.
Shocking how Harvey...
Fact check, true.
Remember how Harvey Weinstein was really big on having tons of questionably to non-consensual sex with lots of financially insecure women?
Yep.
Funny how he was also a huge advocate for abortion.
Surprise.
How does that work? Funny how it would work that men who are big into taking advantage of and having sex with financially insecure women would be big on advocating for abortion. Like Hugh Hefner and people like that.
Or the producer of The Bachelorette, that TV show, who it just came out, his wife, and I think filing divorce papers, she had to get a restraining order against him because when he found out she was pregnant with their second child, basically threw her against the wall and demanded she get an abortion. And
a producer for The Bachelorette?
Mm-hmm. Like the executive producer. Brand new story that just came out.
Oh my gosh.
I'm shocked that a show that capitalizes on the fantasies of one guy getting fawned over and making out with dozens of women and
having
commercializing it.
Yeah,
has a low view of monogamy and pregnancy.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, there you go. So there you go.
Like
we're
said,
issuing
John,
all kinds of hot takes here on Right to Life Radio.
Abortion
Bad.
Mostly for men.
But mostly for men. That's a great way to frame the whole argument. Anyway, Dr. Wen got in trouble from some people within Planned Parenthood because she wasn't using transgender-friendly language. She kept talking about abortion being for women and women's health care, and the transgender crowd is arguing, no, you should say for people. And Dr. Wen reportedly pushed against this because she's saying, stop, if we're going to embrace this transgender language stuff, like, we're really going to drive away, supporters in the Midwest. And the reporting specified the Midwest. And frankly, I think her instincts are correct. As much as the pro-transgender lobby sort of wants to try to enforce this. There are certain biological realities, and the reality is that only biological women can conceive children. And the biological women are the only ones who, because they can conceive children, biological women are the only ones who can have an abortion. So
John,
I think there was a certain, I think Dr. Wen's political and PR instincts in that regard were actually right. And so it's a thing for me where...
Why do you hate trans people, John? I don't understand.
Apparently I'm erasing their existence by just trying to talk about biological realities. Anyway, not erasing their existence. Understand some people have whatever. We're not digging into that whole topic. Anyway, so Dr. Wen has obviously tried to position herself in a certain... tried to position herself and Planned Parenthood in a certain way to orient herself and Planned Parenthood PR-wise to gain broader support, emphasizing Planned Parenthood was about healthcare, emphasizing that Planned Parenthood is about women's healthcare, etc. These are all very sympathetic viewpoints. The Planned Parenthood board seems to be so crazy and seems to be so wigged out about what the possibility of what Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch could do. We're watching you, John Roberts. About what Neil Kavanaugh... I mean, even if we watch him, I mean, it's not like anything we can do. He's got a lifetime appointment. They're so wigged out by what the Supreme Court may do. They're so wigged out by what these various states in the South are doing. They're so wigged out by what President Trump has been doing that they're terrified. And they decided that they need to get away from actually focusing on the healthcare they're providing for women. Healthcare, we'll use that in scare quotes. And they need to focus more on politics. So there you go. If you're donating to Planned Parenthood, understand where your money, through various fungibility means, is going. We'll talk about this a little more after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. There.
I know. I'm gonna have to plug in.
All right. Well, we'll plug in for the second hour of Right to Life Radio.
The sequel.
The sequel. There you go. Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We're talking about the dismissal of Dr. Leana Wen from Planned Parenthood. And there's some aspect to it that I think is kind of sad. Like, Dr. Wen just had a miscarriage like a month ago.
Yep.
And Planned Parenthood canned her, knowing that.
Yep.
Which, kind of shows you the kind of people on Planned Parenthood's board that they would do that.
Kind of insensitive is the best way you can put it. I mean, just...
Yeah. I mean, they're, it's an organization dedicated to killing unborn children. They're probably not the nicest people in the world. Shocking that they wouldn't treat a woman with a ton of respect. Anyway, a really good article that I would recommend to people, I think I might tweet this out on the Right to Life Twitter feed, is written by our favorite, Alexandra DeSanctis from National Review, fellow Domer, go Irish, save babies. She writes, "Surprise, the future of Planned Parenthood is abortion." And she has, this is her piece in National Review about the dismissal of Dr. Leana Wen. So here's her analysis of it, which I think is correct. Alexandra DeSanctis writes, "Wen's dismissal is perhaps best understood in light of the escalating national fight over abortion policy. As blue states have codified the right to abortion on demand, in many cases deeming it a fundamental right, red states have passed limitations like heartbeat bills to protect unborn human beings earlier in pregnancy. Planned Parenthood has long sought to downplay its commitment to abortion, calling itself a healthcare organization and spreading the lie that abortion is only 3% of its business, even as its clinics perform between 1/3 and half of all abortions in the U.S. annually. The group's leadership evidently believes this political moment demands more aggressive advocacy. And Wen wasn't up to the task. Considering her record thus far, she was hired for the MD beside her name and little else." Way to go, Alexandra. "She came across in interviews like a placid physician, repeating rote talking points drilled into her on the drive to the studio. She consistently inserted the phrase, quote, 'as a doctor,' into her messaging." Gosh, I hate it when doctors do that. As a lawyer, I hate it when doctors do that. to give the organization the gloss of medical legitimacy.
I laugh at that joke in particular because both of your parents are doctors, and now I'm picturing, as a doctor, I think it's time for you to go to bed.
I didn't even think of that. No. My parents don't do that. Anyway, jeez Louise. She consistently inserted the phrase, quote, as a doctor, into her messaging to give the organization the gloss of medical legitimacy. And she never sounded like, this is the key, she never sounded like the polished, sure-footed political advocate Cecile Richards had. And I think that's the key. Cecile Richards was the greatest, from a certain perspective, if you're taking in terms of accomplishing the goals of the organization.
Yep.
Furthering the mission of the organization. Missions and goals which are totally evil. In terms of that, Cecile Richards, I think, was the best Planned Parenthood president ever. Maybe even better than Margaret Sanger in some respects. Well, maybe not that great. But still, she was pretty unbelievable in what she achieved.
I don't know. Margaret Sanger didn't have over 100 meetings with the Obama White House.
That's true. Margaret Sanger in her time kept getting arrested and stuff for trying to give people contraception. Cecile Richards met with President Obama a million times. She elevated Planned Parenthood from being one of many, constituents of the Democratic Party, interested organizations within the Democratic Party, to being the gorilla in the room. And
she increased their budget. This is the crazy thing. From federal funding, people don't realize this. When we talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, not only have we not in the last 10 years been able to defund Planned Parenthood,
it's gone up.
Yes. At the end of the George W. Bush administration, Planned Parenthood's annual contribution from the federal budget was around $350 million or so. It was approximately $1 million a day.
Right.
It's now up to almost $600 million annually, John. It's almost doubled in just 10 years.
Yeah, and that's because Cecile Richards, who people don't mention this about her as much, but she's the daughter of the former governor of Texas, Ma Richards.
Ann Richards.
Ann Richards.
Yeah.
Ma was her nickname, wasn't it?
It might have been.
I think
it sounds
so.
right.
Maybe that was just what Rush Limbaugh called her. I should probably go check that up. I thought that was her actual nickname. Anyway, Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas, is her mom. So Cecile comes from this very politically savvy family, and she was obviously enormously successful. She made Planned Parenthood gave Planned Parenthood this essential seat at the table in Democratic Party politics. Now the Democratic Party platform before she started at Planned Parenthood versus now, there are no more pro-life Democrats. There's genuinely only one pro-life Democrat left in the U.S. House of Representatives. There is the Democratic Party now as a party opposes the Hyde Amendment, which they did not oppose the Hyde Amendment when Cecile Richards started at Planned Parenthood. Her influence resulted in the jettisoning of the language of safe, legal, rare for abortion. And now the language that they employ is that abortion should be safe, legal, and universally accessible.
Yep.
Accessibility has become the great buzzword for Planned Parenthood. And that was Cecile Richards doing in large measure. Not only her, but she made a huge impact on the politics of her time and saw Planned Parenthood make these enormous strides. Now, the political losses that Planned Parenthood has been experiencing in the last several months and the pro-choice movement more broadly, of whom Planned Parenthood seems to be, the standard bearer, I don't think you can necessarily blame Dr. Leana Wen that Donald Trump got elected. You can't blame Dr. Wen that all these states passed laws banning abortion after, X number of weeks of pregnancy, and you can't fault Dr. Leana Wen that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals shockingly upheld Donald Trump's Title X funding restrictions, cutting off some federal funding anyway from Planned Parenthood providers. None of that is her fault. But clearly, Dr. Wen signed up for this job thinking, okay, I'm going to be the administrator for an enormous healthcare network. And that's not what the Planned Parenthood president is. The Planned Parenthood president is a political guerrilla who's supposed to go into the gorilla pen of politics and beat up the other gorillas, and get money, get gorilla food, get gorilla, all the stuff gorillas need. Cecile Richards was quite the gorilla. I'm so pretty and she's a gorilla. Okay, but anyway, moving right along. So yeah, what they need is another gorilla. What they need is someone who can come in there and really fight. So we'll see who the long-term president of Planned Parenthood winds up being.
They need a bare-knuckle brawler. And that's, I mean, really, John, we talk a lot of times I know not on this show, but generally speaking, there's a lot of discussion about the institutional power of unions, whether they're, blue collar, SEIU or the Teamsters or things like that, or the teachers unions in California.
Yeah.
In reality, the abortion industry is every bit as ruthless and as bare-knuckle brutal as any union political operation.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something. You cross Planned Parenthood in California state politics, for example, they can primary you so fast. I mean, you got to hold the line. To the point where San Joaquin Valley legislators, Democrat San Joaquin Valley legislators, they toe the line for Planned Parenthood no matter what. They vote the way Planned Parenthood wants them to do. We've wanted Joaquin Arambula to vote the right way. He's voted the wrong way on SB 320. We've wanted Melissa Hurtado to vote the right way. She hasn't voted the right way. So, yeah, they continue to be, the main, one of the most powerful entities in Sacramento politics. Well, we're closing it out with the old Italian man.
Wow, that is a different take on the old Italian man.
Well, this is the theme to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I did not expect.
Composed by Ennio Morricone for the Spaghetti Westerns. So,
I'm impressed.
There you go.
Thinking outside the box.
Yes, indeed. We'll close it out for this week. Thank you all so much for listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. We'll see you next week.